Okay, so here we go. Zoro is probably the most discussed character in the One Piece community, and that's due to various reasons, but we will not get into that just yet or today at all. And he's polarizing for several reasons and easily a fan favorite. If it were not for Luffy being goated, Zoro would dominate the popularity rankings every single year in Japan and in the West. There's a lot to like, so you really can't dispute that, and he has a very loyal fan base. The discussion around Zoro seems to always revolve around the same thing. I promise you, like every single time there's a toxic discussion around Zoro, normally he's being compared to someone or lofty expectations being placed upon him. And honestly, I have to confess something. The more I read about Zoro, the more I reread, the more I just think about things, I am slowly, very slowly becoming an advocate for Zoro being a lot stronger than we think. But I am self-aware, and I will not elicit reactions by overrating the guy. I don't like Green that much. But to the reason why we're actually here, other than to pass the time because you're bored because school is back and it's a lot worse because it's online, Zoro's abilities. Now, I know you've probably heard a lot about Zoro's abilities, even some that are from fan fiction, but we try to stay grounded here, like Dofi after Rhino Schneider. And I promise this will not be a lecture, but just an observation. However, we'll frame it as an analysis because that's what the deep thinkers like. Deep thinkers like nothing more than to stimulate their brain with, you guessed it, deep thinking. And they do this with critical analysis of One Piece characters and Mr. Beast videos. But anyway, how about this interpolation? Among the various Zoro discussions regarding his eye powers or his strength in comparison to Luffy, even his honestly illogical and sometimes downright demented endurance, something that I really haven't seen a lot of people talk about is Zoro's adaptability. Huh? Adaptability? No eye powers? No next level haki? No super monstrous power up? No, not today. Just adaptability. When you think of skills in One Piece and how we judge fighters and their abilities, adaptability is an unsung hero and more often than not can be the deciding factor in battles. I suppose it is just easier to think about or gauge the level of an individual's haki or their endurance. Oh, speed is a good one as well. Overall strength. Technique is another good one. And of course, devil fruit prowess. Ooh. But how does one judge adaptability? To modify, to alter, transform, tailor, revamp, make improvements to. These are all synonyms that explain adaptability in greater detail, which simply means to make something suitable for new use or purpose. In gaming, right, there's a term that's used sometimes which says that someone has adapted without actually saying it. Downloaded. Basically meaning that this person has adapted to your style of play flawlessly and has downloaded your style to adjust and overcome. So that's kind of the theme of today. Adapt and overcome. Have we seen this before in the story? The ability to adapt and overcome. Versatility is actually used a lot, and I think sometimes in the incorrect context, because this just means the ability to adapt or be adapted to many different functions or activities. Most times we say someone is versatile because they have numerous tools which can be used to adapt, but if the tools aren't being put to good use, can one truly be called versatile, or you're just a jack of all trades? Adaptability, versatility, these aren't things typically used to describe Roronoa, but I believe he embodies these things to the point that it seems unbelievable. But I wonder if he doesn't get the credit he deserves due to how disoriented this Marimo can be in regards to direction. Even with great ideas, they quickly lose in the face of Zoro's true powers. I suppose his ability to adapt is too strong. Nonetheless, let's get into just how well Zoro's ability to adapt and overcome truly is. So, where do we start? There are several examples of Zoro doing this, so we can't possibly get to all of them. Well, I guess we could, but I'm hearing my videos have been getting longer and longer recently, and I don't want to set a precedent I can't maintain. The next thing you know, B.D.A 101. Anyway, to Zoro. So again, where do we start? Ah yes, what about chapter 3, Zoro's introduction? To be honest, Oda had already set an expectation in regards to the Pirate Hunter, and when we met him, it's almost as if he was exactly how we expected him to be, but in a completely different way. Zoro was as menacing as we expected, but almost like Smoker's introduction, which circumvented our expectations up to that point about prominent Marines. When I saw Zoro, and when I learned about his story in regards to what he was doing for that little girl, I said, if this guy is notoriously evil, what do we call Axe Hand Morgans? But we'll talk about that yin and yang a bit later. Nevertheless, I think Oda used Zoro's introduction to establish the fundamentals for his character, which makes sense, right? This is the introduction. First off, Zoro was a dreamer, just like Luffy was, and in the midst of adversity, he boldly refused to join Luffy due to his dream, which we now know is to become the world's greatest swordsman. Of course, eventually he changed his mind, but again, we'll talk about that a bit later. Next, Zoro is resilient. He had been tied up for 9 days and was prepared to be there for a month, which funny enough also gave us an idea of Zoro's endurance, but I'd say he's lived up to that so far in this story, right? Next, he's just built different. Luffy told Zoro he'd probably starve in a week. Again, he's just built different, and these interactions between these two, it's just gold. It's funny though in hindsight when we speak of adaptability with Zoro, considering he's lost over 2,000 times to Kuina, but she was just really strong, even though she was a woman. That I think has been one of the best portrayals of a female character in this story. She beat Zoro, even though he was a kid, over 2,000 times. Zoro, when do you give up? Fun fact, he does not. Even still, Kuina did not have the resolve that Zoro did, and even if he himself couldn't adapt and overcome Kuina in that situation, he was actually telling her to adapt and overcome the frailties of her own existence. It's even accompanied by Zoro's fighting style, in which he has 3 swords, and he's extremely skilled using his blades, be it 1, 2, or all 3. It makes it a lot easier to adapt. In this instance though, with Luffy saving him from the grasp of Helmeppo, Zoro made the decision to not only continue his dream, but to throw away the frivolous notion of good guy and bad guy, because in One Piece, what does that really mean? The goal was to be the best and to be known. The way in which it came didn't matter, as long as he was the greatest. There is deeper meaning to this moment which adds to Zoro's character, but it's subtle. Zoro didn't just arbitrarily decide to be a bad guy or toss aside what it meant to be good or bad. He realized that the line was severely blurred, and therefore being good or bad wasn't based on profession. When he first met Luffy, he called him a bad guy. Do you think Helmeppo was a good guy? Or even Morgan's? What side do you choose? Kobe called Luffy his hero. This was the first shining example of Luffy's special power to draw others to him, but also Zoro's innate perceptive abilities to understand the world and continue this dream. Perception for Zoro is not a new thing, and when we get to Whiskey Peak, it's even more apparent. Again, adapt and overcome. There are other small yet significant moments along the way where this is apparent for Zoro versus the Nyaban brothers, where he lost his swords and eventually dismantled them. When we get to Baratier and dealing with a monster that was Mihawk this soon and attempting to overcome someone who had mastered this being the ability to adapt and overcome. The gap in strength was so large that Mihawk showed that through sheer skill, he could adapt and overcome Zoro's devastating blows with relative ease. But how does one deal with such a convincing and overwhelming loss? Years of training with an unwavering desire to win? The bandana can only take one so far. Something amazing in that moment while Zoro is fighting Mihawk is Luffy's restraint to not join Zoro's fight, recognizing and understanding a man chasing his dream, even though his trusted partner was being overwhelmed. However, the established principles of Zoro's character leads to truly remarkable moments. Through resolve and resilience in the face of death, Zoro made a decision that moved even the greatest swordsman in the world. A scar on the back is a swordsman's shame. This is all after the overwhelming loss. One thing should be clear if it hasn't been made pristine enough to be understood: to adapt and overcome is not strictly done in battle. It is done constantly in everyday life, in overcoming struggles and disadvantages and turning them in your favor. Through this moment, Zoro pledged to never lose again until he fought the world's greatest and won. Yes, Zoro had just experienced an overwhelming loss, but he was prepared to adapt and overcome even that great mountain that stood before him. This wasn't supposed to be much of a deep dive into the makings of Zoro's character and what makes him appealing, but it's impossible to really talk about his abilities without understanding his struggle, because honestly they go hand in hand. Zoro's resilience in Arlong Park. Attempting to buy time for Luffy and Sanji, even though the previous injury from Mihawk that I was just talking about, that overwhelming loss, it was still affecting him. Arlong even referenced that he should not be standing due to the injuries he had. He was so threatened by the sheer will of Zoro, he felt like he had to kill him at that moment. But, like I stated before, endurance is one of the established principles of Zoro, so is this really all that surprising? We honestly could do this all day. In Whiskey Peak, as I mentioned before, with Zoro calmly assessing the situation and turning a battle against bounty hunters into a session to test out his new swords. We still don't believe in this man's ability to adapt and overcome. Swords, nuns, children, physical strength didn't really matter, because this is where Zoro excels. We're starting to run a bit long, so let's start to wrap it up and highlight the moments in which this shone the brightest. Let's head to Alabasta with Zoro versus Mr. One. Herein lies another instance in which Zoro is faced with another overwhelming task. He was facing a man who apparently had never lost to a swordsman ever since acquiring his devil fruit. So what was Zoro lacking? Personally, I think in terms of skill, he had Daz Bones outclassed. He was more agile and even physically stronger. The only thing Zoro lacked, quote unquote, at this time was this one ability to cut steel. I think what's interesting from this fight is that Daz Bones really never stood a chance from the onset. Daz Bones had the audacity to ask Zoro, Roro Noa Zoro, how long can you last? He truly did not understand his opponent. So Dad's bones eventually gained the upper hand due to this one disadvantage that Zoro had. But again, with the established principles of Zoro's character, he's built different. His endurance isn't quantifiable. And in perilous situations, do I even have to say it anymore? Some may say the breath of all things is an ass pull, and we can use Ashura here as well. If something keeps happening and a character keeps showing that in any situation he can adapt, whether it be against a manslayer with 2 swords, an admiral who uses gravity, or the ultimate adaptability feat, which is twofold in a brilliant way of bringing all of Zoro's greatest traits together. This happened in phases, so let's try to keep up here. Phase 1. Zoro is sent to Karaigana Island, by Kuma after Sabaody, and he goes to fight the human drill, who imitates and essentially adapts to whoever they're fighting. Zoro had to overcome this before proceeding to the next step. Phase 2. With the news of Luffy and the situation at hand, Zoro had to overcome the intense feeling of rushing to his captain's side. He tried to do that, but finally Phase 3. Zoro had to face the man he had been chasing and overcome his actual pride, bow his head, and adapt to the situation at hand to become stronger for his captain. Essentially, the established principles and traits we had come to know Zoro for was all on display at Karaigana Island. Zoro might just be the GOAT, not gonna lie. Based on how things play out when Zoro is involved, you always expect him to adapt and overcome. Call it a hockey bloom, call it an ass pull if you want to be dumb. But at the end of the day, these are all established things in Zoro's character. So Zoro's overwhelming strength, an intensity that's almost suffocating, where when people see Zoro, they assume that he could be the captain of the crew. There are actually levels to this. And we can keep going, but I think we've reached the end. But if you guys like this, let me know. And I will highlight the special abilities of all the Mugiwaras. But yeah, that's it, guys. Again, let me know what you think. What do you think Zoro's most fearsome ability is? Personally, again, like I said, I think it's his ability to, well, you get the point by now. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Follow me on Twitter at BrogDAce. Follow me on Instagram at BrogD.Ace. Thank you to my patrons. I appreciate you guys so much. Make sure to like and subscribe. I shall catch you guys in the next one. Peace.